Hello, beautiful people. We are continuing our Connectathon. It's emerging from 1 hour to another with more exciting topics and content and broadening our minds, hearts, souls, and energy field that we connect through circles and through all the possibilities that are ahead of us. And I'm happy to announce the next session, which is called Visioning New Regenerative Development Goals. And regenerative as a concept started to come forward along with the circular economy and basically taking the primary spot in the last couple of months. Rightly so, because it was completely overlooked when circular economy came on stage. And when we put some serious thoughts into it, we see that we need both. But who knows what regenerative really means? And Robert, to you as a host of this session, and please, we are all ears. We want to learn more, and how can we become part of this?
Thanks so much, Violetta, and yeah, it's lovely to be here. And welcome everyone to hour 6 already out of 24, the Connectathon, the Ecocivilisation Connectathon. It's really a blessing to be here with you. And yeah, we're going to envision regenerative development goals. And let's see where it takes us. So to give you a short summary of the hour, we will first show you some pictures on screen, sharing screen about the Sustainable Development Goals. We will take a look shortly, briefly, at the Wheel of Co-Creation from Barbara Marx Hubbard. We touch upon why we are talking about the regenerative development goals, and we will give a few tiny little examples as sort of, yeah, to show what we can do with them. And I would love to hear your reflections. What do you feel could be a wonderful regenerative development goal? And also we will do a round, so that will be about 2 rounds of 20 minutes. What do we feel about what has been shared so far? So I will start sharing my screen, and I do this just to give you an idea about, yeah, what exactly is regenerative. If you apply it to a design, something practical like building a village, it's regenerative means that in principle and in practice you get more out of it than you actually put in. So this is opposite to degenerative designs, where more resources are put in and there is more energy waste and leakage. So basically that's very, in a nutshell, the concept. Share screen. Okay, so I will move this up so it's out of the way. And maybe it will take a second to load, but oh, it's nothing to show here, it says. It's quite interesting. I need to reopen it, I guess. Yeah. So the Sustainable Development Goals, we all know them. And the question is, just as a starter, it is a great example how we can open up things and how we can get discussions going. But there are lots of things to review, not as criticism of judgments. It's just an observation that the Sustainable Development Goals are practically not that sustainable. Again, it's a great way to start conversations, but you can see here some things are highlighted. Maybe I make this short. Yeah, there are some major critical points we have, like SDG 8. When we're talking about decent work and economic growth, we have seen with the COVID pandemic that we only need 30% of work and jobs to keep systems going. So basically the rest is, yeah, we call it a little bit with a critical note, the bullshit jobs, but basically that's all we need, 30% of the jobs. And so all this economic growth is really not needed. And it's degenerative. That's one thing. We also highlight SDG 9. We can see global supply chains breaking down. And we want to focus within the SDGs or highlight that it's now time to organize. It's time to connect and form partnerships for the goals. So what you can see here is that roughly all these sustainable development goals are in silos and they are fighting symptoms. And that's one of the observations that we have. And maybe I can go back a bit. So there's one picture I want to show you. Give me a minute, but it doesn't seem to be present here. Should be here. Yeah. No. Okay, I have to open this one again. Okay, I will jump to the example of what is a regenerative development goal, because I wanted to show you another picture, but give me a sec. I'll stop sharing the screen. Because it is an important picture. Okay, go. Well, it's strange, it doesn't seem to load. Anyhow, maybe I can arrange it differently. Again, you know, I can be very persistent if I want to share something with you guys. I think it's worthwhile waiting for. Okay, last attempt, and otherwise we will move on. Okay. Can you see this? I'm sure you can.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
good.
We can. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the wheel of co-creation of Barbara Marx Hubbard. So if we zoom out, you can see that this is a free interpretation of her design. You can see that society roughly, and there's a gray area here, but let's say roughly we can divide society into 13 sectors. Barbara started with 12, but we put in the middle love for the planet, for the community, for ourselves, and for our families. But you can see these 12 sectors on the outer ring, and basically they're all connected. And you can see that we have two main sectors that weigh heavily on the others. We are talking about economics, the degenerate form of economics, and governance, sort of the rigid structures we have now. The last few years, we've been studying alternative economic models. We've seen some examples already during this connectathon, and also self-governance, of course. And we've seen some beautiful examples also from our African neighbors. So why do I want to show you this picture? Because at the moment, a lot of feedback loops are still missing. And if you take a look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, you can see that yeah, when you keep fighting symptoms, you do not get to the root causes. The problems will come back again and again. And these feedback loops can ensure that we sort of get a bigger understanding, a broader understanding, what is actually happening in our society. So if something changes before, instead, let's take in housing or infrastructure, it affects another sector. If something changes in learning and education, it has an effect on other sectors. And I just wanted to visualize this so you have an idea that it's all, like we know, interconnected. Yeah, so this is how we sort of can make this transition to getting to the root causes and not fighting symptoms. The regenerative development goals are aiming for that. Go to the other picture. So to give you a few examples, for instance, so this is like a regenerative development goal, a suggestion to meet everyone's basic needs. I know there's a lot to say about universal basic income and services. And as a stepping stone, it can be very valuable because you can create sort of a safety net for people who really are in need. You can create the conditions that people can feel more healthy. They have less fears to fall out of the whole treadmill. And it will open up some space for people to give some air to also, go inward a bit. And we also have inner development goals, but that's another story. Okay, so that's one of them. A regenerative development goal could be to secure universal healthcare for everyone on this planet without a need to pay for it. What you see here, by the way, is based on the 3 pillars of activism I shared before, how that works. If you want to know more about it, I can share more later. What also can be a regenerative development goal is a 24-hour work week. There is an English think tank that did a study, and they figured out that 24 hours work week is perfect to have a good balance in your life. You have enough time for leisure and for regenerating, and also maybe compared or in combination coupled to a basic income, you can live more healthy. So that's basically, I can stop sharing the screen here. There are more regenerative development goals, but we are envisioning, so you can see like a sort of top 10, but I would really love to stop sharing the screen and go into a round with you all, what you feel would be a wonderful regenerative development goal. And we can take 20 minutes for that round, if you like. So everyone who feels called to open the floor or reflect on this. I can see in the chat there's an agreement on 24 hours. And it doesn't specifically need to address the examples. We can talk about it, but I really would love to hear from the people in our circle here, what comes up for you.
Robert, may I ask you for your sort of more generic definition of regenerative? I mean, I offered something, but I'm sure that that's not all. So regeneration meaning like regrowth of damaged or missing parts. Is there a broader one that you go with?
Well, I gave this example to sort of regeneration means that currently we see a downward spiral happening, right, worldwide. Societies are basically, and structures are falling apart. And because we are having degenerative systems, ergo our problems, the climate crisis, and also COVID is related to this because the pressure keeps building up and up and up. And the problems will probably get worse until we reach a certain tipping point. I know Eugen knows a lot more about that. But basically what we experience now, this phase, is a degenerative spiral where people are falling out of the systems. We are now in this middle phase, and that's why we are connecting with each other so beautifully, because we want to figure out, okay, this doesn't work anymore, but what will or what can work? Let's figure it out together. So we're in this pool of all these projects and information and connectathons. And what we find is there are many regenerative solutions that bring or ignite or initiate this upward spiral. That means that we get more energy out of the systems, the new systems that we develop, than we basically need. So for me, that in a broader context, that's the definition of regeneration, that we recharge, revive ourselves within systems that takes care of our health and the planet and nature. I would say sustainable is pretty good as a stepping stone, but it doesn't go far enough. It just sort of maintains the situation while the problems still are getting worse. So I hope that answers your question, Violetta. Let me check if someone else.
So let's say Karsten, go ahead, and then Joy.
Thanks. I kind of wanted to jump off for 20 seconds on what Robert said. Like, at the core, it seems so obviously simple that the SDGs, they're based on problems, right? They're based on fixing things. And there's very, very little orientation towards how do we want to live? How could this be beautiful, right? What do we want? And I don't think people move very well when it's just about, well, let's survive somehow and let's fix things. It's hard to get out of bed in the morning for that. So if we could come up with goals where people look at them and are like, wow, you know, whatever crisis we're going through right now, this could actually turn into something better than what we have, than what we had. Because a lot of the SDG sustainability is about just keeping what we had. That would be lovely.
Yeah. Thanks, Karsten. I'm not sure if you're frozen.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and comment, Robert, before we pass it on.
Oh, yeah, you were frozen a bit. Were you complete, Karsten?
I'm not sure. Depends on what you still heard, but let's assume I was complete.
Okay, thanks a lot. Joy, you want to reflect? You have to unmute yourself. Possible.
Sorry, I was thinking about what you were saying about the 24-hour week, and as somebody who's moved to a 27-hour week, I find it's totally transformed my life, basically. But I'm at the end of my working life. I'm post-retirement age, so I'm actually in quite a lucky position that I find myself that in the place where I do my job because I choose to, but I also have, I'm now allowed to have more time, so I'm allowed to be involved in more things. I'm allowed to be able to think about other opportunities and other possibilities. So it's an incredibly privileged position to be in, you know, post raising children and doing all that other stuff. So I think there's something about, for me, the role of perhaps older people or just people in general having the opportunity to have the time to spend to envision another future, to get off that treadmill, because we're so locked into, to have a chance to think about how things could be. And I feel like I get kind of, I suppose, a bit overwhelmed almost by the possibilities, because I now have time to think about it. So that's just there's an energy to be tapped there, I feel.
Yeah, as a short reflection back, Joy, thank you for that. Yeah, that's the thing. It's immensely helpful if you can create a space just so people can have a breather and have the time to think and process, and also have time to find things which makes them tick, find their paths, go where their gifts are. And again, I mentioned to sort of couple it to universal basic services or an income. It's not necessary, but it is a powerful cocktail that opens up a whole energy field for people to regenerate and choose another path. So thanks for that, Joy. Andy.
Yeah, just to make a point, we'll pick it up from the last two, from Carson and Joy. Carson, I used to do a lot of public speaking, and I'd go on a stage with a big broom handle, and I'd ask somebody to come up, and basically you could only get somebody to move as far as you could hit them with a broom handle, right? You're not going to motivate them very far. But if you stand with a lot of money and you ask someone, do they want it, they'll come from the back of the room, right? So I was satisfied that people will move further for something good than they'll move for something bad. The only caveat, we did this in some schools which had deprived children, people that were turned up to schools and things. And one of the most powerful things that I found was that they were conditioned not to move towards something that was positive. The cohort of kids actually made fun of the person that went up and got the money, right? But what I did again is I got more money out and said to them, who wants to come this time? And again, most people did come, but the one guy who got the money the first time, he came back up because he discovered that there wasn't a great punishment. In fact, it was a great reward. So I think you're absolutely bang on. And then Joy, another Scot, I've just got to say, yeah, at 55, I decided that I wasn't going to do what I was doing, which was a lot of kind of coaching online, because I wanted to go outside. And the thing that I discovered is that by taking more time to go outside and just discover the world or rediscover the world and get joyful about it, and just putting up the odd post every now and again, people started coming from Alaska and Texas to Scotland just to spend some time and have some time with themselves and with me in a beautiful environment. So I absolutely think that this whole thing about fixing the world and sorting problems and how terrible we are, it will move people, but actually people will put a lot of effort into something much more positive. That's my experience anyway.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Andy, for that input. Maybe we can, unless somebody else wants to, but I think
You have two more.
Artie, you want to?
Yeah. I was just connecting some of the other speakers, from the previous sessions, and in fact, on the idea of the whole regenerative process. So Alice mentioned that, and she very categorically mentioned families as units of social building or society building, And Brad spoke about governance. And he also spoke about the third attractor. When I look at, what you spoke about, Robert, and when I look at these three other speakers and their points, I look at, which is the problem area that all these three things connect with. And the problem area is basically fear of relevance. I think people are so overwhelmed by how are they going to find themselves relevant in the future in the context of the information overload that they are not able to navigate through as of today. So when these two things are juxtaposed and they are in the middle of these two realities of where they stand and what they're confronted by, I think that is the system. The system should be able to answer for this. What we are trying to create here today should be able to connect these two for them. So their fear of not being able to endure what's coming up for them and how relevant are they going to remain or not is possibly the thing that should be answered for them. So how, to what degree and to what depth or range should we broaden our thinking, our capacity to endure and navigate through all of this, whether we need, we are doing well and are we productive enough by a 24 or 27-hour week, and all of these things really get answered through how much are we able to endure all of this. So I think Ubuntu is one of the answers to this question of what lifestyle or what thinking style or what navigation style should we adopt. So possibly there are a lot of the new interdisciplinary has to emerge out of all of this. So the older interdisciplinary, of course, has relevance. We should never ever sort of abandon that, but always draw from it, but also fuse it with what our emerging system is asking for. So possibly that fusion has to really take place for that regenerative process to take shape. So yeah, that was my 2 bit to it.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Artie. Gavin, you want to reflect?
There's so much in that to speak toward. I basically don't even know where to begin. But the first thing that struck me when I look at those goals is that there's an absence of any thing around empowering the individuals, making government accountable, getting rid of corruption in a country where government and government corruption and criminality is our principal problem. I find it very strange. If we want to actually change things, empowering individuals should be a big part of what needs to happen. And obviously that's the idea of the UBI, as you were saying, Robert, that in some ways it might level the playing field to allow people to give themselves more, give themselves more in their own life and to have more power in the world to choose and to decide their own fate. But depending on how that UBI is instituted, it could be exactly the opposite, or it could do nothing at all. It could be just a means for control. If you don't get, let's say the rest of the economy goes to mechanized and automated and AI, and you got your UBI, but unless you behave, that's you don't get it. That could be quite a terrible thing. Also, if the basic economic structures don't change and we still have to pay our rent, but now everyone's got more money and they just demand and supply, and everyone your rent goes up because now people have more money and they can get more, so they just do that, and the food goes up because they can get more, and the basic economics basically means that just gets funneled upwards as is. On the other hand, I find it weird to be in a system where most of the money is created by banks making loans, private institutions who then profit on the money that's been put into the supply. And that's something that the Bank of England did confirm a few years ago is responsible for most money creation. Why not have a system where the money is created through the people? So essentially brought into existence as that UBI that then floods into the system, but goes from source outwards. There's lots of, I think, room for systemic rethinking of how money flows through our system, and basically then how power flows through our system. And as Eugen's pointed out, it should be both top down and bottom up. You need to have something that's responsible on every level. And at the moment, we are far, far, far away from that. So also, I really appreciate Carsten's comment, when we look at those goals, I just see kind of more of the same. And maybe looking at those surface symptoms, but nothing really deeper. And in that sense, I think I really appreciate what we're doing here, because I think this is individuals empowering each other, empowering themselves and directing. And I think one way or another, that's what needs to be supported. We really need to empower people to, as you say, Robert, live in a way that they can, share their own superpowers, develop them, live a human life where they can look at themselves and grow and work together. Because I really do feel ultimately it is that we're a species essentially, and each of us has a place and a part that really is our joy and our thing. And unless we can come together in that way and express ourselves truly in harmony, that it'll always be a kind of a fear thing from the top, and people kind of putting each other into boxes and being very scared to really allow each other out to express themselves, essentially.
Yeah, totally wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, it's just a short reflection back. We've shown some examples what could be a very good regenerative development goal, but it doesn't say it is. So I'm certainly not implying that it is the solution. There are so many great solutions and ideas and concepts out there. That's why we are now connecting with each other to find sort of a common solution. And yeah, so I totally feel with that. And I see it really as stepping stones, another phase in our evolutionary process. And you know, there's lots to say about what we can expect. We can expect a lot. The paradigm shift, what we are talking about, or humanity's phase shifts, can happen very quickly when maybe nobody is expecting it, or we do it in steps and stepping stones, very, you know, organized and planned, or there will be sort of a chaos. Nobody really knows, but I know that's certainly what we don't want to happen. So that's for sure. So yeah, thanks. Ferial.
Yeah, thank you so much for the session, Robert. And I just wanted to kind of riff off what others have already kind of said. Joy brought up a point where she said, you know, she's at, you know, past retirement age, and now she gets this opportunity to sense make and to really think about this. And we know that there's a large part of our world that is really just busy surviving. So there isn't time or space in days. And even those who are more than surviving, even then they're so busy, right? And some others have said that here. I love what Gavin had said, for us to make those spaces. And I really believe that even in, like, this is what this is about here today, right now. And some of us maybe have more opportunity to actually reflect, to actually sense make. And what I'm wanting to input here is, what if we were to take this over into our spaces wherever we are, and really, I think it's almost as if really we need to become very deliberate about making those spaces. Because even in some places where I've been involved in networks and things where we were busy doing, you know, outer kind of cultural and social development stuff, we seem to put the inner development as an add-on. And if you look at the UN, when they decide, you know, they made these development goals and then realized, oh, actually, they're not going to work if we don't. And some people brought into their field of consciousness inner development goals, and yeah, let's put that on. And I feel as if it's an add-on as opposed to a central part of our being. If we don't feel into, if we don't sense into, if we're not listening, I think earlier Violetta said that, why are we not listening, right? To the rumbles of nature in us, not even outside of us, but in us. Because we are these incredible carriers of a story that started, you know, thousands of years ago, maybe even millions of years ago, because it's even beyond just the human story that we carry in us. And if we were just prepared to listen and making those times, and I know that it's hard. I know that it's hard in a world that is busy and calls for so much of us. But if we become, as I said, maybe a bit more deliberate about wherever we are, for our children, for not just for when we are older, but for now, every one of us really thinking into, sensing into what wants to emerge, what is next for us? How do we design a world that is different? And not just start designing, because that's what we tend to do. We like just doing a bunch of stuff, right? Because we're so now used to being these human doings, as opposed to what we're supposed to be, human beings. And I'd go a step further and say human interbeings, where we're not just listening then to only our own voice, but to the voices of every being, and then designing kind of regenerative goals that encompasses all of that, encompasses all of who we are. So yeah, just throwing that in there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wonderful. Yeah, so I'm very intuitive. So while you were painting that picture, Ferio, I think I feel like creating sort of some gestures with my hands, very positive ones, that maybe expand a bit more on how we can be regenerative. You know, I'm a coordinator for several transition platforms, and that means that a lot of groups and movements are working together, finding each other on a meta level. And what I also love to do is connect groups that are really grounded and being active on a grassroots level. I think they're equally important. The driver there in the middle, in the center, is the love for our planet, for humanity and nature and the cosmos. And basically what we are working with is these little missing parts at the end that sort of connects the energies on the meta level and the grassroots level. These are the feedback loops that we are now, I think, are co-creating together. And once these feedback loops start going, then we sort of have this torus effect. We go inward and outward, and this is sort of the regenerative energies that I sense that we can create together as a reflection back. Thanks.
Robert, there is a really interesting comment by Joy. I'm not sure if she wants to come forward and just share this challenge that she has. Joy, do you want to share this, what you just wrote?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'll need to check back. What could you read out what you mean?
Well, there is a comment on the top of that there is also the need to connect, to be able to listen to others and ourselves, and to connect in the rural areas. I find it so hard to be with others and think through solutions, ideas. Why do you think that that's the case, and how do you go about?
Thanks for that. What I really find is so difficult, and it's like it's a reflection of Scottish society, but I'm sure lots of other places too, where we've got a sort of mentality around how things, you know, if somebody comes up with an idea of something that could actually be world changing, really, or even just our local area changing, it's kind of like, oh, that's really great, but it couldn't happen here. You know, that sort of poverty of aspiration, or belief that we are not good enough or not important enough to be able to have good things happen here. So I suppose because of how I'm wired, somehow seems to be always thinking about big dreams, big visions and stuff. I struggle to find people that would actually to stand alongside or to work alongside to make things happen, because we believe that it's wonderful, and in a dream world it could happen, but it couldn't be here because we can't have that for this place. It's a very feudal area, really. So yeah, so that's what I feel I'm struggling with all the time, really. And it's for me, it's sort of since COVID and connecting digitally, that is what sustained me to enable me to sort of try and keep on taking action and trying to make things happen, because otherwise I was just this mad woman, you know. And the older I get, the madder I'm seen as, you know. It doesn't help. I fit the stereotype now as the mad old woman in the attic.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joy. Yeah, there's a lot there, of course, and there are certainly a number of groups that are working on projects that sort of keep that aspects in mind, that you have a good balance, that whenever you are present in rural areas, yeah, you have enough space and connection with nature. That is not possible. I once went to an eco-village, and I'm not saying that's the solution, but it's also a great network in Los Angeles, and I didn't expect it there. They just sort of organized 4 houses, blocks, and created gardens there, and they were building their own vegetables. So some people, you can be very creative. You don't expect this in a big city like that, but I was surprised by it. I'm not sure if Ferio or Eugen was next, but Ferio, you wanted to respond?
I'll just say something real quick. So Joy, myself, and Andy, and a couple of us here are actually in Scotland. I don't sound like it, but I have lived here for 20 years now. So we have this really great project that's kicking off in the next few weeks and months called Scotland Makes Sense. And we're hoping to encourage others around the world. If you're interested, please hit me up. As in, we want to see Slovenia make sense. We want to see the US make sense. We want to see, you know, and just kick off your own conversations of not just going into doing, but actually talking to each other about how do we be, and from that being, how do we do? So please, Joy, talk to us and get involved.
Cool, wonderful. Eugen, good.
Will there be a link in the, sorry, will there be a
Yeah.
link in the chat, please?
Okay, Eugen. You have to unmute.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of things that really triggered my attention. Started with Robert's root causes well, the many things going on, and then how to make things happen. And how to make things happen is something that's really what drives me. And in that respect, there are two things that I'd like to bring in here. From participation with many networks, it turned out the solutions we need are there today. That's the good news. But the bad news is the higher their potential impact, the quicker they get stuck in the system. And the question is now, how can we make this happen? And I think it was from or Gavin, I think, who already mentioned, yeah, we need something not just from bottom up, but also something from top down, sort of top down, not necessarily the government, but from the system level that frees the path for all these high impact initiatives in particular. And when we looked into it, we actually identified a couple of root causes, and I wanted to bring one to your attention that in my experience is undermining everything we do. And that is related to nature. Well, we have nature, but we treat our planet not as nature. We try to push human-made rules up in nature. Nature doesn't allow this. And what we guessed really, what a real root cause in our experience is, and that's apart from the Law of Nature initiative we work on, is that today decisions are made based on human-made rules everywhere, at expert level up to CEO level and government level. We have rules like laws made by humans. We have fixed ways of thinking, and when decisions are made, the question is always, what do we have to be compliant with? Then the laws come in, best practices, all that stuff. But one thing is missing, the rules of nature. If you ever experienced decision makers asking that question, what rules of nature may apply? So may apply when we make this decision. And it turned out the complete concept is missing. I've spoken with politicians here in the Netherlands very briefly, and they didn't know of the concept. Even in science, in physics, engineering, and so forth, rules of nature are applied, but there's no concept around it. It's natural. But when you ask where are the rules applied in social sciences, in decision-making, management disciplines, there was no answer. On the contrary, the response was, we don't know how to apply the rules from physics in social disciplines, in management disciplines. So in that respect, there's now a huge opportunity to introduce this concept into decision-making to free up the countless obstacles, bureaucracy, and so forth. And by the way, bureaucracy and complexity standing in all our way, in the way of all our initiatives, are solvable by basically two rules of nature. Yeah. They are there today. It used to be common sense in my environment. I worked at a very large company in the IT industry. Some may recall Ross Perot, who tried to become president in the United States. He was the founder of the company. And he had a culture in there where we navigated through complex systems to highly effective solutions. And even there, to fix this, well, gridlock situation in decision-making, innovative solutions are available today, and they come from within the midst of complex environments where people have made the hands-on experience on what works versus what does not. And with that, I would like to invite you to, well, listen as we move forward with this initiative. And it's my hope that at some time in the not too distant future, we can come together and perhaps combine our efforts such that this problem gets solved. And with that, I want to
thanks, Eugen. Yeah. So basically, I won't sort of summarize everything what you said, but I do. What I pick out of it is that if we could sort of implement life-affirming criteria or principles into our decision-making models, that would already be a great step. If you want to reflect, otherwise we will give some other people space.
Just very briefly, the main elements is relevant laws of nature, decision makers, relearning. I really mean relearning. It was part of common business sense a couple of decades ago. Relearning the integration of laws of nature and how to apply them. Applying the practices Einstein, Newton, and Darwin would apply. They are different from the practices applied today, even in science. And we have a professor in that field who actually provides deep insights in that respect. Then decision-making by core human values, just a few that can be remembered, like health, safety, shelter, and essential behaviors like an integrity that works in today's world.
Yeah.
And that's different to the integrity, for example, that's applied today. That's it.
Thanks.
No rocket science required. And now I shut up.
Thanks, Eugen. So,
Robert, we have only a few minutes to the end of the session, and I have this burning question for you. You know, this was a very dynamic, very broad discussion.
Yeah.
What have you learned about regenerative and principles from this session?
Well, certainly that there is no ultimate solution, and we shouldn't look for it. I think that there is certainly a level of consciousness and awareness that we acknowledge that the SDGs, as beautiful as they are, that they basically are not sustainable, not in the way that we want it, and they don't address our root causes. So maybe that's already a great first step. And then figuring out together, okay, what would be a great solution? I don't think anyone really can come up with an answer, and we shouldn't. Together we can. I just saw in the chat someone saying, I think it was Ellen, that like talking about resource-based economy. That's for sure an option, an open access economy, where you have access to resources, and a world without money. That's all possible. There are 7 or 8 forms of capital and currencies, and fiat money is only one of them. But these 7 other currencies, they're not acknowledged yet and validated yet. And there lies a very huge potential and opportunity and energy to be released by us together. So that's sort of my last reflection on it. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Robert, for exciting us about the topic of regenerative economy, lifestyle, agriculture. We haven't even touched that much, but I think that now it's time to stop recording and to give ourselves a few minutes to stretch our legs, stretch our hands, grab probably a cup of coffee, because